Hello friends, welcome to another tutorial of EOBIM parametric modeling and C# scripting channel. Today we're going to continue a previous video on how to change project units system in Revit through the Revit API. In the last session we created a script that changes the units of our code. We made a script that only changes the unit system. For example, I can change this file from a imperial unit system to a metric unit system. Look over here. I paste metric as my unit system. I pass this unit system to my unit object in the code, and then I define the units of the document with that units. So I will save this and I will compile the project so you can see how this works to change the units in a Revit project. This should change from imperial to metric units, and there you see it. We have millimeters instead of feet and inches. But in this tutorial we're going to go further. We want these metric system units to go very specific on the format that I want these units to have. I want this script not only to change the unit system of the project, but I want the script to format some aspects of the unit system. For example, if we go to Manage tab and find the Project Units dialog, we find that we have a list of fields. And I want, for example, the length field to be formatted in meters and with 4 decimal places, like this, so that I don't have to see this in millimeters and with no decimals. I want this to look, I want the script to format for me the unit system in this manner. So I am going to set it back to imperial so we can see the full effect of the code when we finish. I'm going to compile it again and I'm going to run it in Revit. Okay, there we have it again in imperial unit system. So let's open our documentation, our Revit API documentation, and start our code. The flow of our code, the path that we follow, is to change the document units through the set units method. That set units method requires units type object, and that's why we instantiated the units class, and we store it in this variable that we passed to the method. But in order to instantiate this unit class, we needed a unit system, and that's why we reach to the unit system, that is a static class, and we find its member. It is an enumeration, a unit system, and we found its member, and we store it in a variable that we pass to instantiate the units class, and we pass that unit class, that unit instance to the method of set units. Now, in order to format some fields of the unit system, we're going to follow a path that is a little different. We know that we change the units of a document by passing an object that represents the units. So The logical step and the step that the Revit API presents to us is to change, to alter the properties of these units before setting the units of the document. So we will have to define the specific properties that we want to, the specific elements that we want to format in these units that we are passing to the set units method in the document, to the document, in the document. I'm sorry. So we're going to review this. How do we change the settings of the units class? And here we have the documentation, the units class. We find its members, and we will encounter that it has a method called set format options. Let's investigate a bit more. The set format options method sets the default format options for a spec. We don't know yet what is a spec, but we see that we can set the default format options of the units class. So this is going to be our roadmap. We have units, and we have in the units class a method called set format options, and that method requires, as we see here, forge type ID and format options. Forge type ID and format options. So this is a roadmap for this tutorial. What we are going to do in this tutorial is to execute this method that will change the units that will be used to change the document units, the unit system, and that unit system elements or properties, that unit system fields. So let's go on with it. Here we already have the units. The units are stored inside of this variable. So let's copy and paste this over here. I am going to differentiate the previous step from this one, so we can have a clean, a more clear notion of where we are. We don't really know yet how we will call this step. But we know that we have the units, and we have to execute this method, and we need two arguments, a forge type ID, a spec type ID, and some format options. This method, in this method, it's evident that here we specify the element that will be formatted, and in the second argument we specified which options, which settings we are going to set in that element. So let's go on. Let's find each one of these options. The first one, forge type ID, I must say that was very confusing to me, because when I saw this, I thought immediately, well, I am going to find this type, this class, to create one of this. And when I looked for it, I found that forge type ID does not have a direct way to identify this field that I want to format. You remember that in Revit you have the unit system, and you have a bunch of fields that a bunch of units that you want to format in a specific manner. And when we see the documentation, we notice that the forge type ID class doesn't seem to have anything like that. And I must say that I really got confused when I was preparing this script. And I don't remember when or how I decided to search for this second part of the documentation, the spec type ID. I put it in the search bar of the documentation, and I found that there was a class called spec type ID. And this class didn't seem to be correct because the method requires forge type ID. But nonetheless, I decided to investigate this class. And when I searched for its members, I discovered that here were units, exactly what I needed. Here are the units. And here I encounter distance, for example, that was one unit that I wanted to modify. And I found that this property of the spec type ID class actually retrieved forge type ID, exactly the argument that I need for my method. And then I said, okay, this is what I need. And then I returned to the spec type ID, and I found out that this is a static class. This is a static class, so I can use it. I can use it for this. I can call it right away without instantiation for creating this argument. So let's go with this step. Store obtain forge type ID for set format options method. So how will we do that? We are going to create a variable of forge type ID called forge type ID of distance. That is going to be the first field that we're going to format. And we find that forge type ID, searching in this namespace and finding the spec type ID class, and this class member this class distance property. Here we have it, distance. It has a get and it retrieves a forge type ID. And we're going to do the same for the other field that we want to format. The other field that I want to format is length. We can see over here and we find that there is length in the same manner. I will say that this is not distance but length. I have here two variables. I will find not forge type ID but forge type IDs. I want to format two fields, distance and length, and I will use the same process. I will find that static class and I will use its get property to get the forge type ID length. Okay, we have it. And this is going to be so useful because we can format not only the one field at the time, but we can actually format two fields. But for the benefit of the tutorial, let's stick to one field only so we don't get confused. Okay, here we have the forge type ID, and now we have the first argument of our method, of our project unit method. We have the forge type ID that we want to format. Okay, now we need the second argument. The second argument is format options. So let's go back to the set format options method of the unit class. Units class. Let's go to its members, go to set format options and format options. Format options, we see that it is a class. We need to instantiate it. So we can notice that we have another step. in our algorithm. We now are in the fifth step, that will be obtain and instantiate format options. Instantiate format options. And this step is quite delicate. We need to have some care when creating this. We have here the format option class, and we see that we can instantiate it. So let's do that. Let's create a format options class. Let's instantiate that will be called FO. And I always like to be clear on the namespace of format option, so we can always remember the way that C# works. We find in the namespace the particular class, we store it in a variable, and we will create that new instance, new format option located in this namespace. And this format option has a number of constructors. And a while ago, when I was studying for this tutorial, when I was even recording some previous sessions, I made the mistake of constructing this instance with this first constructor. But this says that it creates new format options object that represents default formatting. This locks the modification, the customization of options in the formatting. So we don't want this. We rather want this second constructor that it represents custom formatting. This is what we are looking for. So let's search for this constructor, and we see that it requires for forge type ID, and it requires specifically for an unit type ID, forge type ID. So we already know that we don't have to find the general class, but this more specific unit type ID. We search for it, and we find that unit type ID is a class, but it is a static class, pretty much like when we found this spec type ID. So we're going to follow the same process. We're going to say here, we're going to create a forge type ID for this step, forge type ID for unit type ID, unit type ID. And we're going to find it in Autodesk Revit database, unit type ID, instead of spec type ID, unit type ID. And inside of its members, we're going to find the units. This is incredible, because if we don't specify this, it will take the general project settings, and we will not be able to format them in a very specific manner. So here we can find meters. Here we have meters, and we just have to pass them. It is a property. Meters over here. So this will add another step to our tutorial that I would like to specify, because we sometimes think that it is, well, that we already know what we are doing, but it actually is quite important to specify very well what we are doing over here. This isn't working right, so I am going to create it. I really like to explain graphically what we are doing. Here we have a this will be our sixth step, instantiating of the format options, but the fifth will be obtain unit type ID. Type ID, forge type ID. ID for to instantiate format options. Okay, this is very important. And then in the sixth step of our algorithm, we're going to pass this forge type, that it is a unit type ID, to instantiate the format option. And when we have the format option already set up, we have the second argument of our algorithm, that is format options. But we are not done yet. We still have a bit of work to do, because we now need to set precisely the format options, because we said, okay, we need format options, but we haven't specified what are those options. We need to do that before passing the format options. We here are only saying pass whatever options are created with this constructor. We have to change the options first. So let's try that. Let's research in the format options class what options do we have, and we find that in the properties we will encounter all the properties, all the aspects of the units of those specific fields that we want to modify. And this is so incredible. This is exactly what we need. We want to change the accuracy. I'm going to copy every one of these, because this is so important. I want us to see each option, because this is such an important algorithm. We have here accuracy. I paste it here. We have here is valid object. This does not work in this algorithm. Is valid object. Rounding method. Suppress leading zeros. Suppress spaces. Suppress trailing zeros. Use default. Use digit grouping. Use digit grouping, and use plus prefix. Okay, these properties are properties of the format options members. Look here, I have a spelling error. It is format options, not format option. And the format options, which properties we are changing, it's stored inside of this variable. So this variable represents that format options object. So I am going to alter each one of these properties. I already said that is valid object property does not work in this algorithm. It throws an error, so we are not going to use it. But the other ones we are going to use them. Okay. First, we have accuracy. Accuracy refers to that amount of decimals that we want in our units format. Rounding method refers to the rounding how could I say it? The process, or it's the way that Revit rounds numbers. Nearest, it takes it, and let me show you with a calculator over here. If we have, for example, 0.004, Revit should round this to 0.00, and that's it, because 4 is nearer to 0 than to 10. That would change this last 0 to 1. But if we have 0.006, Revit would round this to 0.001 if we select the up or nearest. But if we select down, even if we have 0.009, I understand that Revit will round this to 0, 0. It wouldn't round it to 0, 1, because we are specifying that we want the down option. So we're going to stick with nearest, only nearest. It's the natural way. But remember that that this property requires an enumeration. It doesn't. It particularly requires a rounding method, enumeration. Here you can see it. It requires rounding method, and rounding method is an enumeration. We say Autodesk Revit database rounding method, and we find its member that it's called nearest. Okay, we have it, and semicolon, nearest. Okay, then comes the next property, suppress leading zeros. These are zeros that are in front of a number. For example, this I will say false, because I will say true. I think that this option does not work, but let's use it anyway, and we can correct it later. Suppress trailing zeros. Those are zeros that are like this. These zeros that doesn't give us any information. Those are trailing zeros. So we're going to suppress them. I understand. Use default. Use default. This indicates if we use the default or custom formatting. True will be default. True is default formatting. We don't want that. We want custom formatting, so it is false. And use digit grouping, that is the next property, is so important. It indicates if digit groupings symbols should be displayed. And well, this is important. We want that. We want digit grouping. This means that this number that is hard to read will be formatted in this way. So yes, we want that. True. And the last property, use plus prefix, that is the plus sign, the plus sign to indicate if a number is positive. So I want that. True. Now we have customize the formatting options, and we're going to say that as the next step. Customize formatting options properties. properties. Okay, and then the next step is, in this case already, okay, we're going to set format options on units object, and then the last step is to change document units inside of transaction. So let's try right away how does this algorithm works. Let's see, let's try to debug a bit. Okay, we have an error, line 111. We miss a semicolon. Okay. Let's compile it again to see if we have another error. It seems that everything is fine. And let's go back to Revit. Let's run the script, and we have here, suppress leading zeros was set to true, but leading zeros cannot be suppressed for the display unit in these format options. You cannot suppress leading zeros in matrices. This is what I understand. So suppress leading zeros, well, let's change it to false. Okay, let's compile again. It will compile correctly, and let's execute this script. It says I am working, but it kept the imperial unit system. Let's see what happened. It seems that we did not change the imperial unit system over here. It was a mistake, and let's do it right now. We will say metric instead of imperial. We save it, we compile it, and we run it. Okay, and now we are set up. And you may say, okay, but you didn't actually change that measure. And that is correct, because I actually changed, if you notice, I changed the distance. I changed the distance spec type ID. I did not change the one that controls this formatting. Let me show you. Manage project units, and you will find that I changed correctly the distance field, but I did not change the length field. This is the one that controls the dimensions formatting. So let's do this, and you will see how easy it is, because we already have the formatting units. We only have to repeat this process over here, not only with distance but also with length. And of course we need to grab this length spec type ID. Length spec type ID, not only distance, but we also want another variable to store length. Okay, length over here also. And here we set that formatting options, and everything should work. Let's see if everything works. Okay, correctly compiled, and let's run the algorithm. Now it is working. So we go back to the Manage tab, to the Formatting Units, and we see over here that we actually have all the units set to meters, and with 4 decimals, and also with this indication over here with this digit grouping symbol. So this is it for today. A wonderful script that changes the unit system of our project and also formats the fields on our project. So if you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe and leave your comments below, and we will meet again in another tutorial.